This is kind of like the most imposter syndrome I've got, which is I'm reading wonderful writing from another writer, and my job is to kind of tear it apart a little bit. And I mean, down to the level of I will read a sentence and I'll go, that sentence isn't complete. That's a sentence fragment, right? And and my and I got like 98th percentile on reading and comprehension in my SATs, but I still will go, who am I to question that, right?
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to sit down with somebody else's work and say this is good, and pronounce this okay and this bad, and I mean all I can do is apply the things that other people have applied to me, and I can feel kind of good about that. But generally, giving feedback it's a great honor and also kind of terrifying for me.
Well, and before we hit the record button, we were talking about how I sent you pages earlier this week and you read through them, got them back to me, your notes on them and whatnot, just a few days ago, which I haven't had a chance to actually read through all of them yet. But it's one of those things where when I've received that critique and that feedback from you, I'm still not taking everything that you say and automatically incorporating that. So that is how I always talk to you when I'm returning pages. That's how I talk to anybody when I'm, critiquing, when they trust me with their work, because it's always like, this is a suggestion. This is
Right.
just from me. So that takes a lot of the pressure off, I think, because, ultimately it is up to the creator to work out whether or not my particular feedback worked for them. You know what I mean? Or how to solve the problem. That's all on them, not me. I'm just
Right.
somebody responding to the material that was given. So I do think that for me takes some of the pressure off.
Yeah. No, I think that, as I said earlier before we started recording, is this idea that when you get notes from somebody, the problem is always probably true, but their suggestion of how to fix it is probably not, you don't need, that's probably not as good. And that doesn't matter. That could be Stephen King, that could be anybody giving you those notes. If they point out a problem, it probably is a problem, and you probably do need to address it. But if they
Depending on
say,
the person.
yeah, but I mean, but if they're saying, here's how you can fix this, that's
Yeah.
I think that's less likely to be true, less likely to be something you, and I have gotten kind of in a twist a couple of times with people coming back to me saying, you know what you should have done. And I'm like, no, that doesn't work. And that's part of the thing is I think that you and I worked out this thing of you'll make suggestions and I'll go, and in my head I'm going, yeah, I can see that. I'm absolutely ignoring that. I'm just
Yeah.
not right.
And not taking offense when it's
Yeah.
like, oh, that person didn't take my suggestion on how to fix it, but maybe they rearranged stuff. I will also say, I had situations where I had a lot of beta readers looking through, in particular, Nowhere in the Hierophant, because those were the books I was most focused on as I was starting this querying journey to find an agent. And so I had lots and lots of eyes on it. And there were numerous people who would point out an issue that was an issue for them. I'd read it and I go, actually, that I don't perceive that as an issue at all. So just because
Right.
one person referenced it, that to me was not enough for it to resonate and for me to make a change. But the advantage of having so many beta readers, I think I had 5 when it comes to different levels of readers. If you have a pattern of multiple people identifying the same spot or the same issue,
Right.
then that's something I think that you very much need to pay attention to, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
That's
I
something.
mean, and my feeling is So I'm going to use an example from my last book where my critique partner didn't like a character whole cloth as written. Just absolutely had a rabid anti Athena response.
Your
I had a
critique
character
was pretty brutal about that. Yeah.
really was. But so I, and I was running along. I was about 30,000 words over what I'd ideally like a paperback book to be. And I said, well, what if I were to just take her out essentially? And that one thing, that one, and that was a big, brutal decision to excise that character and make her just like a tertiary character, right? From like a secondary main character to like kind of a bit player.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, a couple things happened there. One is all any of the things that you were picking up on in terms of negative were gone, and what was left of that character were innocuous. I mean, even if she had a little bit of a bad attitude or like a bad taste in her mouth, she was a small character and it didn't matter. But what also happened was the pace of the book sped up and you got to the bits that were the most important bits, right? So there is no way in the world first of all, a beta reader would never have said that. A beta reader might have said, boy, I don't like that character, but it wouldn't have been a big thing. But I think that the volume of your reaction to that character, and I was writing that character to be not a bad person, but morally ambiguous person, right?
I viewed her as being a pretty despicable person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a moment where you did not take my advice on how to fix it, which was, I believe I left a comment box, which was, can we please send her into outer space already? Into outer space.
That wasn't the exact solution, but I will. You need to give this time. There are more books in the series.
I know,
Be patient.
but I'm
Be
glad
patient.
that was ultimately like obviously
Well,
even though
and it was interesting because that feedback, I turned that around. I turned those revisions around, yanking like 3 chapters out where she was the main character in those chapters, yanking those out and doing a little bit of surgery of exposition and things that needed to be the reader needed to know that were in those chapters that I pulled out. And then turned it right around, right over to my editor from there, with the thought that if she goes, I feel like something's missing here, I would say, yes, well, here's why. And then I'd need to put bits back in. And she never said that. And that is, to me, a sign of that was a good edit. If you can pass it to your editor and your editor doesn't even know you ever did it, that's a good edit. That said, I have had critique from, and this is a big thing. There are beta readers I've had who were not qualified to give the level of critique that they were giving, right? They just weren't. And you don't know that when you first start with beta readers. When you don't know that this person that you met in social media who volunteered to beta read your thing, whether they're a numbskull or whether they're a genius. You just don't know until you get their feedback. And then when you get their feedback, if it's articulate, but it's wrong, it can be confusing as to, is it wrong?
That's why I think you have to have several voices looking at the same thing so that you get an overall consensus.
And you also start to curate the people you're listening to the point where I trust this person, I don't trust that person, so that person gets faded away. That's and also there are people who I trust on line edits, and there are people who I trust on plot points, right? It's not something like that. But that said, the thing that has made me feel less anxious about giving other people critique is getting critique from other people and making the realization that there are people who are good at this and there are people who are not good at this. And I'm not good for everybody.
Yeah.
There are other writers that might not find my input valuable, right? And don't develop the kind of back and forth. You and I have developed a kind of way of communicating in our notes that are constructive, and the famous shit sandwich, right? A slice of compliment, a piece of shit, and then another slice of compliment. I mean, but that is, but I think that there are people who I've worked with who they might be perfectly great critique partners for somebody else. They just weren't for me, and so this anxiety, I think that especially for new writers, this is an anxiety that is right to have it.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it lessens.
Right. And I truly, as long as you, as someone who's critiquing or beta reading, giving feedback on somebody's manuscript, I think as long as you recognize your limitations and control and your qualifications too, right? That you're not God over this manuscript just because somebody asked you to read it. The author is not required to make the changes you suggest. And you may not know what you're talking about. I think as long as you remember all of that, you're good.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, I mean,
giving your opinion on it.
And also courtesy is hugely important, right? Just being curious.
Yeah.
We have shared a common critique partner, a beta reader, who wasn't particularly courteous,
No.
and that was kind of the first clue that they may not be competent either, right?
It was a great A/B test experience, right? Because there were comments left on my manuscript. This individual didn't know that they were beta reading for the both of us, and that we knew, right? This particular individual was particularly harsh about women in their writing, and it was fascinating to see the kinds of ways that they communicated to you versus the way they communicated in the notes that they left moi.
I gave you my notes to read.
We exchanged, yeah.
Yes, right, yes. So this is a lesson for people who are thinking about beta reading, and this can happen. You might have your notes. So behave as if other people might be reading your notes.
Exactly. Be kind, because that's also part of sharing the writing experience as a colleague, where it's like, oh, I'm looking for somebody to beta read this manuscript that I have. Do you have anybody you can recommend? Well, you know what I mean? Like, it's possible that you may not be somebody that
I think that you actually, I think you didn't recommend this reader.
No, it was totally by freak accident.
It was a totally freak accident. That's right.
Yeah, that this person reached out to both of us. We were looking for beta readers at the same time.
That said, I got to tell you, the idea of reaching out to people is how you get beta readers, right?
Okay.
You don't get beta readers by saying who wants a beta read. You get beta readers by reading other people's work and volunteering to read other people's work. That's how you and I met. I mean, at some point, yes, you do have to say, I'm looking for someone to beta read, but you gotta just dive in and start doing it. And the surest way to get, and it's also the surest way to get a beta reader back who you respect, because if you read somebody else's work and go, wow, this is a full-fledged book, this is well done, you want those people's input on your work. So that's my blanket advice for all writers is start beta reading today as quickly as you can.
I agree. Yeah. You're also going to form, like us, you're also going to form like writing partnerships and friendships that you wouldn't find anywhere else, because you've gone through this process together and you've had some extensive conversations about the craft, and that's something that not everyone is going to get or communicate in the same way.
It's also, and as far as that relationship goes, that's a real interesting relationship, because there aren't a lot of people who will read your work that will actually have conversations with them about it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the people who are buying your book and becoming fans and things like that, that becomes a real one-way street, right?
Yeah.
And your parents and your friends and those kinds of people, that's another different, the power dynamic there is weird. But this idea of I'm going to read your weirdness and you're going to read my weirdness, and we're just going to say, okay, granted, we're both kind of weird.
But from one weirdo to the other,
Yeah,
here's what I
yeah,
think.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I do want to point out before, because we were talking about how you very painfully at first had to extract Athena and put
yeah,
her, relegate her to a little bit of, and that you felt like that improved the book. At other times, things can be removed, and then you realize, no, I need to put that back
yeah,
in. But
yeah,
ultimately, like you were saying, it's a really good sign if your editor or whoever is helping sort of like make the book shine at the end in the final production stages. If they don't even notice that it's gone or different, that's a great sign. Nevertheless, I would say it's okay as a writer to hang on to like those bits like, and to still have an opinion of like, oh man, I wish I could have done it the other way around. So, for instance, I didn't even think about it until you brought that up. I am holding a shameless self promo nowhere cup I made. I can't turn it around because there's a phrase on the back that does give a spoiler. Maybe in a few years, I will be able to like actually carry this around and not worry about what side is showing when I'm outside of my house. But what happened was is that I had this moment in nowhere that I felt was so poignant and strong, and like it really connected sort of Finn's experience with the son that he lost, Aiden, to the terror and the pain that's happening all around the community, but especially to his next child, his youngest child. Um, and I had someone who I very, very much respected. She was a former Pitch Wars mentor. Um, she actually she read all of Nowhere as part of like the Pitch Wars sort of application process, and she got back to me and said, "I can't take this book because I think this book, like, I'm not going to be able to make it better. Like, you're ready to take this to an agent, but here are my notes." And what it included was, I don't think that you can include this sort of thing on the screen, so to speak. Now, it's not because it was particularly vulgar. It's not because it was
story.
right, gory or anything like that. It wasn't particularly violent, but it was terribly sad, right? And it was disturbing in terms of like actual fear from especially a parent's perspective. It would reflect one of your worst nightmares. And so she suggested like take what happens in that scene and make it somehow off screen, so to speak. And I did. I rewrote that scene, changed it numerous times, changed even how like that ultimately led to the conclusion of Nowhere, because just by changing that one scene, which I can't give too much about. I keep trying to like find a way to talk about it on a high level without giving away what's presently in the book, but just changing that one scene led to a far different encounter in order for Finn to end up going where he goes next. And so it had this ripple effect throughout the book that ultimately I do think people enjoy. I enjoy it, but I still hang on to that one scene, which
Right.
you actually read and you agreed with the changes that were made. That it's like, no, I think the way that it's now, like the format that it's now going to go out in, is better for XYZ reasons. But I still am so like spicy about it that like on the back of this cup, it still gives away that ending. Like it's
The
still
alternate ending. Well,
it's
when they
such
make
a
it into,
snarky statement on the back of this, but it like makes me laugh every time, and I just needed to do it for myself.
well, there's going to be this when they make a movie or a series or whatever,
Mhm.
that's the thing that those are the kinds of alternate endings that people go, yeah, let's go with that one instead of, right. So it
Yeah.
may live again. It may rise again.
It may. And I mean, I this is a conversation for a different time. But I also struggled with bitterness regarding, to me, it felt like there was almost a gendered quality to it with the critique. And I don't say that as in like that the person who I respected deeply was trying to impose, intentionally impose like a gendered component to it. But I can tell you there are plenty of male horror writers out there on the market who are still just brutally doing some very grotesque things to their characters, their young characters, as death scenes. Um, and this was nothing close to it. I felt like some of the critiques, not just from this, again, very respected person,
Would have been different
but
if you were a man.
yes, because I think even subconsciously, I think a lot of times women are viewed as like, but you're the maternal figure, right? Like you're supposed to write about this
Protect the
little
kids.
doctor, right?
Protect those children. Yes.
Right. And so if you'll notice, I mean, this is not a secret to anyone who's even read the synopsis, like the children start disappearing into the woods. There are no scenes in Nowhere where the children are like really violently or gruesomely or anything like that disappeared, so to speak. Like
Right.
they don't meet gory endings. It's adults who have to worry
Right.
about that kind of thing. And again, I'll say this was not what I would consider a particularly gory scene at all, but it was heartrending.
I remember as I was reading it, feeling that this was very King-esque in the sense that you've got this dysfunctional family and um and you put the kids in a situation where, right, this that, Cujo is 100%,
Oh yeah,
and Cujo is the only book I ever threw across the room when I finished it.
really?
When he killed the kid, spoiler, the kid dies in the end.
That's what, 30 years old.
I was reading that in my kitchen and I just went, holy shit. I just absolutely, I was so that was really, 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 really rough. Um, but and but I gotta, I mean, there wasn't a part of me that thought,
Cemetery has a brutal stuff about dead kids. You know what I
yes,
mean? Like, that I can think of so many.
yeah,
So
no, there wasn't a part when I was reading yours where I thought she's being irresponsible. She's not. I mean, it's that didn't seem to, that never even crossed my mind. And it 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 actually pisses me off a little bit to hear that that was the case. But
yeah, but I mean, looking back on it, I mean, what I will say is that scene was already gone by the time my agent read it. And my agent never missed that scene, right? She liked it in the format that I changed it to. Same thing goes for my editor, that kind of thing. I will
did you ever
say,
have that conversation of
yes. Oh yeah,
okay,
not with my editor, but with my agent. And she was like, "Nah, I think we made the right decision on that one." Also because it was consistent with the idea that you never really see any children die in the book elsewhere.
yeah, yeah,
Funny enough, I did remove a scene that was exceptionally in my opinion, grotesque, in terms of like both this character and like his background and what he had done and then what happens to him, etc. Which it's like you very much at that point feel like you had it coming, you son of a bitch. But I had removed that for the sake of space, continuity, all that kind of stuff. And my agent had been on board with that because, again, this was during the developmental editing process where we're trying to get it, you know, to a certain word length and et cetera, et cetera. I had removed it completely. And then my editor came back and was like, I really feel like something has to be resolved with this particular character and this part of the story. Like, you need to tell me more. So that we were actually able to go back and be like, well, we have this whole scene we pulled. Let's put it back in here. And the moment she read it, she was like, no, this has to go back in nowhere.
See, this is so this anxiety of you absolutely, I wonder if editors, professional editors feel that kind of anxiety when they're reading somebody's work. They almost have to, right?
Yeah, especially starting out, I would think they have to.
Yeah, and I also feel that in conversations with my editor of this kind of hesitancy to screw with it, to break something that may not be broken kind of thing. So